Welcome back to the latest episode of TT Plays. Today we're going to talk about Scepter of Lumina. Lumina? Yep, we're going to learn how to pronounce it together. And we're going to talk about the really cool deck the people over at True Champions Gaming made that I got to play in their little mini tournament. Spoilers, I went 0-2, but I think it's a really cool deck. So before you yell at me, I understand Franklin's not in scene. I am in the process of arranging my office. Franklin's right over there. I understand, so I set up a second camera. It's not the best camera, but there's Franklin. You can kind of see him at the top of the tank right there. So a little bit about Franklin, because I told you I'd give you a little more information. He's a Diamondback Terrapin. He's a male rescue that I got. They are indigenous to the eastern seaboard of the continental United States. They used to be endangered. They are no longer endangered. He was captive bred. Someone got him, didn't really understand the needs for him, and that's how I ended up with him. So someone asked, you can kind of see in the top left there, this little, I can actually make this a little bigger, I guess, if I'm just going to talk about Franklin. You can see in the top left there is this cave-looking thing. So that's actually basically a wall. There's a basking light up there and a small platform he can be in. The giant black tube on the left is a, what do you call that? It's a UV sterilizer to help keep the water clean. It's triple filtered, and it used to be beautifully planted, and Franklin has destroyed every live plant we put in the tank. There are some ditherfish in there, which are basically interactive food for him. You see the larger geophagus right there. That is actually a tank buddy of his. And there's a bunch of crawfish in there. So again, if he gets bored, he can go off to the crawfish as well. Franklin is about 1.5 years old. He is fully grown, and I feed him about 3 or 4 times a week. He gets pellet food normally twice a week, and then once a week he's going to get raw shrimp, and then once a week he is going to get raw fish. So Franklin's okay. He's right over there. I've proven he's okay. We're going to shrink that down. You can keep that right there. You guys can look at Franklin as we come back and talk about Scepter. So there's been a lot of misconceptions about Scepter, myself included, especially when I made a video at midnight talking about it. So we're going to break down Scepter, and then we're going to talk about this really cool Zander deck I got to play. So we're going to ignore all of the text on Scepter except the top. And what this says is if you're a water champion, for a materialization cost of 1, you can bring the Scepter into play. Right? The text on the card doesn't matter. There's nothing on the card that prevents us from materializing it normally. So we can just materialize this for 1 in our materialization phase. All right, next chunk of text. As long as each player controls a water elemental champion, you may activate this card from your material deck. You still pay its cost. Okay, this just gives us another way to materialize the card, but it doesn't take away or restrict us from materializing it normally, like I said again. So just like the Soul Knife that we run in Fire Zander, we can banish the cards from my graveyard to materialize it. We can also just materialize that weapon, and it's the same thing from the Scepter. So we can play this in every matchup. So we can build a deck that's based around leveling up to deal 4 damage to target champion you don't control, which is what this actually does, right? Whenever your champion levels up, deal 4 damage to target champion you don't control. We can build a deck around that. We just are able to get this into play easier, right? If it's in a water mirror, it just takes us a normal materialization if it's not. So again, there was a lot of confusion around this card. It's a really cool card. And the final ability is nothing to sleep on 5, banish the Scepter, draw 2 cards. Hey, that's great. Now, before you ask, a lot of people are like, oh, this is really busted with Merlin, and I ask why, and like, oh, level up. So let's go along and let's define what level up is. So if we look at the comprehensive rulebooks, under 1.7.A.5, that's card type, subtype champion, they define leveling up. And leveling up, it's a subtype of champion, so I think you figured it out. A champion can be incrementally leveled by placing the next level champion card on top of that champion's lineage. The next level champion is placed on top of the previous level champion. This is known as leveling up the champion. Leveling a champion can be done as a result of materialization, a champion card during the materialization phase, or as a result of effect that instructs a player to level up their champion. That is different than Harness Mana, or Merlin needing a float, or Kingslayer gaining a level counter. So leveling up has been clearly defined. It's when our champions change basically in a positive manner. Okay? So gaining levels is great. That is irrelevant from the Scepter. Leveling up, which they've defined again, and the rules right there, when we get to do that, we get to deal 4 damage to someone. And we can play the Scepter in every single matchup. So I think those are kind of all the important things I want to talk about with Scepter. So if you're with me so far in the Scepter, let's go ahead and talk about this Zander deck I got to play in the True Champions League. So this is the list I got to play with just 2 changes in it. And you can see we're going Spirit of Water to Zander 2 to Zander 3. And our goal here is to just, our main source of damage is a Scepter of Lumina. And you might ask, why are we going to Karazi's Chosen? Well, it's because we gain Stealth and Spell Shroud. So we basically time walk them for a turn as we go to level 3 here, right? Because we're actually playing a Turbo Fog deck. Because really my only kill con is Reflecting Missiles and Scepter. So it's a really cool deck the guys brewed up in some weird like caffeine deficiency haze at 3 in the morning. So again, we're not revealing anything. We're only playing 2 Luxem cards. And the purpose for this Zander is we get a prep counter, we gain stealth, and we get Spell Shroud. So we're basically, I'm going to say, immune to enemy effects for a turn, right? Zander 1 doesn't really do us anything, gets us a prep counter glimpse. Zander 2 literally has absolutely no text outside of its basically banish 2 cards, right, to deal 4 damage using Scepter. So the deck is built around this. Poison Dagger is another way we can deal damage on, but we are drastically lowering our expectations at how much damage Poison Dagger is doing. If we have 2 sources plus the dagger itself, that's probably a good turn to throw the dagger. There's one other combo we'll talk about in the list that maybe dagger has a higher ceiling, but if we know we're going to level up and then dungeon guide, we might want to hold priority on the trigger and just send the dagger over. We also, if we know that we're going to level up and then we are also going to dungeon guide, the Poison Dagger would be beneficial there as well, right? The dagger would deal 1, each Scepter would normally deal 4, that's bumped up to 5, so that's an 11 damage turn there. So again, nothing too spicy here. We have Cloak of Stillwater, which is banish a card with floating memory from your graveyard to prevent the next 3 damage that we dealt to your champion this turn. Again, we're playing Turbo Fog. We have Tariff Ring, a fantastic way to like kind of stodge people up. We have Luxera's Map. And what this is really used for is finding more Reflecting Missiles. But let's go ahead and jump down to the main deck. So we have Floating Memory. We have Floating Memory and Taunt. Idle Thoughts obviously pairs really well with Fractal of Insight, so we have the Fractal of Insight. We have Fracturized to try to slow down our opponent and additionally benefits us from the Floating Memory. We have Reflecting Missiles, which is our secondary kill con. If you look, we are running 7 Fractals in the list. And one of the things I would change is I would actually up that. So we're running 7 Fractals, so Refracting Missiles, is just another large damage source that we have in here. Intrepid Highwayman is a great assassin card that gives us Floating Memory. In addition, it has Intercept, and when it's retaliating, it attacks for 4. So it's really good at knocking out an opponent's thing, kind of stodges it up there. We have Resolute Stand to, again, right, we're running Turbo Fog. We have Peaceful Reunion. I'll say it again, we're playing Turbo Fog. We have Shrouded Mist, right? You kind of get it now, Turbo Fog. We have Karazi Trapper. What can we do with those prep counters? Well, we can basically reduce 3 damage from someone with them, in addition to using this Trapper. We have Tide Diviner to find stuff, and this is the main way that we're going to be dealing damage here with Innervate Knowledge. And Lineage Break Trent helped me out here. I had never cast this card before. I thought the Innervates were going to be really good, if you remember back my FTC card rating videos, and, you know, I was maybe right. It just took a banned and restricted update for it to happen. As an additional cost to this, de-level your champion and recover 5. And this is important. You have to be able to de-level, and you have to be able to recover 5. So if your opponent's smart, they're just going to push you to 4 if they think you have this to kind of play around it. I realize in the long term, you're probably doing okay if they've only pushed you to 4, but I do want you to know that you have to have 5 damage to recover in order to use Innervate Knowledge. Right, we talked about it, right? Shroud and Mist, Resolute Stand, and Peaceful Union are all basically fog effects for people attacking us. Revitalizing Cleanse allows us to draw a card and recover a whole bunch because we're kind of just holding up in the game, trying to find the right cards we need. Frostbind is obviously just a common water card, just to be a pain in people's butts, slow them down, make them play their hands less efficiently. And here's the one Luxem card they added in here. I did not know this card existed before they sent me this list. Prep 1. On hit, if it was prepped, wake up your champion and return it to your hand. So if by leveling up to 3, we're going to have 2 counters. If we at some point generated another counter off of a Trapper, that's obviously going to give us a 3rd. So then with the Poison Dagger, right, we can use this to swing for 2 at least 3 times, and with some help from a trapper, maybe 4. Right, so that's a lot of damage in this deck that really doesn't have a lot of ways to find damage. It's one of the cards we could grab with Luxera's map. So again, I just wanted to point out the 1,000 refractions here. And that's really the core of the deck here. We're just holding up our opponent. We're putting kind of taunt models in front of them. We're blanking out big potential turns with Peaceful Reunion and Shrouded Mist. Shrouded Mist being fast in the class reduction. Oftentimes the class reduction is negated by the trinket, but hey, that's okay. We are de-leveling with Innervate Knowledge. Note the Recover 5 is mandatory because it's an additional cost. And then we're leveling back up again to ping them for another 4 off of the Scepter. Obviously, we want to de-level at these lower levels. One game, I was able to de-level from Zander to Spirit and then back up to Zander, right? That's obviously kind of the most efficient thing, because if you're banishing 2 or 3 cards, it hurts. Leveling up to Zander itself gives us that basically Time Walk with the Stealth and Spell Shroud baked into this. Hopefully they don't have True Sight. We have Poison Dagger, but again, we need to lower our expectations for it unless we're combining it with 1,000 refractions. We have the map here. And the map gives us a lot of flexibility. Normally we're searching for a kill, which is going to be Refracting Missiles. This deck has 7 fractals. I would recommend upping that personally, probably to 8, possibly to 10. And then we obviously have the 1,000 Refractions being the other Luxem card, which we can pair with the dagger. Other cards we have is Cloak of Stillwater to just kind of slow them down a little bit, right? Prevent 3 every time we banish a float. Not the most efficient, but we are running those Tide Diviners. We have Terrafring here, again, just to kind of tax those wide decks on that 1 turn, hopefully give us that additional turn. I made a change for Orb of Glitter. I really value the Glimpse in the Recollect to help us find the right card. There are a lot of cards in this deck that are very situational, and the ability to filter through them in Recollect I value pretty highly. And then we just have Nullifying Lantern to slow down those kind of unfair graveyard decks. Our sideboard isn't anything too amazing, nor is it terribly refined in my opinion, but we basically have Fishing Accident, which is just rest target ally. If Fishing Accident was prepared, you can put them on the bottom of the opponent's deck. That's obviously really strong. We have Water Barrier. Don't really think I need to say anything else about this. Note we do not get the class bonus. We have the 4th Shrouded Mist. We have Tidal Proc. Again, I don't know how important this is outside of Rye, but Tidal Proc is a great card. And we have Caliburn. So, again, relevant cards here. Do we need them all? I don't know. I would love more Resolute Stands. I feel like this deck is very weak to Rye, but I don't know if that's honestly fixable. And I want one more layer of like interaction. I'd be tempted to swap out these Revitalizing Cleanses for like Frostborn Apostles. The Apostle gets us an Intercept body, right? And it's a removal, right? If we look at the Apostle, right? Intercept level 2, which should happen some of the time. We're built around leveling up, right? Target rest the ally you control, you don't control, excuse me, gets -4 until the end of the turn. So I think that's something we can explore. Tide Diviner, I know is an amazing card, but it's felt bad ever since I played Water Merlin and went back to playing non-Water Merlin Tide Diviner. So again, I like Tide Diviner. I might be willing to cut it for Paladins. We probably don't have the float count for Paladins, but man, I do love Paladins. Just getting that additional like 3 to 6 to 5 damage in on someone really helps when we're basically just doing chunks of 4 here, right? Like we level up, if we get 4 for each one of these, that's only 12 damage. Let's assume we de-level and level up one more time, that's 16. We still need 3 damage to kill most level 1 heroes, right? And we're going to need, what, it's 16, so we're going to need 7 more to kill most level 2s at minimum. 6 to 7 more. So again, we need that extra damage from somewhere. It might be Refracting Missiles. I wouldn't be opposed to adding Paladins as just another source of damage in the deck. So yeah, tentatively, I would also kind of want to include Paladin here. So again, I think there's actually a real deck in here somewhere. We would have to find it. I don't know where it is, but I do think there's an actual deck in here. Some cards that felt bad were just all these random situational cards in the situations they're not coming up, right? Which is, again, hopefully that Orb helps. I would also maybe consider an Orb of Regret in that case, but I kind of like the persistent thing, especially because we're going for this kind of longer, grindier game. 4 dungeon guides feels great, and one of the things I'll say is don't get rid of them, because if we're trying to de-level, leveling back up again with the dungeon guide, I think is one of the best ways to get that additional 4 damage out there. So again, this is Zander Fog 1.1.1 with my slight changes to it. Again, huge shout out to Terry, Cabin, and Isaac at True Champion Gaming for inviting me to their mini tournament and for letting me play this deck. It was a lot of fun. Remember, Scepter of Lumina. Please tell me how you pronounce that. I want to say Lumina, but then I think I'm playing Flesh and Blood. You can play this into any matchup. You have an additional way to materialize it into the water mirror, and you can build a deck based around leveling up and de-leveling. And I think that's a really, really cool mechanic, and I'm excited to check it out more. Legitimate concerns are we are slower than normal Water Zander. We are a 101 deck at best if we're playing in an hour. And you just have to be willing to do that. I also don't know that I would want to play this deck into new players, because, like, I don't know. If we want to talk about negative experiences, there's just no one likes playing into Fog. So this deck doesn't win quickly. I don't know how consistent the deck is. In the mirror, if they fracturize this and you can't save it, I think you scoop and go to the next game, provided that water deck has shown you another win con. So yeah, fracturize is a legitimate concern. Try to protect your Scepter with a Frostbind at all times. But again, I think it's a really cool deck. I really enjoyed playing it. I think there's something here. We just need to go through and refine it. So again, I just wanted to explain the Scepter. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about the Scepter, myself included, so let's clear the air on the Scepter. I wanted to show you this shell of a deck that's really cool, built around the Scepter, and I want to know what you think you're going to be playing about the Scepter. Let me know down here in the comments below. Let me know at Twitter. So I do want to thank you all for joining me on this deck tech and this talk here, and until next time, everyone, cheers and happy gaming. So with the camera running, I ended up feeding Franklin. I don't normally feed him in his tank too often because he's messy, and any food he doesn't clean up just kind of adds to additional waste here. But I know a lot of you like Franklin, and I promised you more content about Franklin. So you can see he's actually eating a piece of shrimp here, and he gets a piece, he tears it off, which is pretty normal. And if you look, the Geophagus, his tank buddy, actually takes it and runs away with it. The fish is just fearless. He is actually, I've seen him take food out of Franklin's mouth before. You can see, I wouldn't say sharing, but he's definitely jumping in there and sniping food away from him, which is really interesting. If you look at the bottom left right now, you actually see a crawfish or a crayfish. I mean, you can see the reflection of my head, and you see the crayfish kind of scuttling out. For whatever reason, Franklin is super nice and sometimes even scared of that companion fish, the cichlid. But if he's bored and sees a crawfish, he just goes predator and just shreds those things. It was kind of crazy the first time we put it in there. I try to give him like the best life he can have, considering he's living in a tank. And I think interactive natural food like that is important. If you look in the corners, you also see snails. Snails is something else that terrapins normally eat. And obviously that crawfish wants nothing to do with Franklin as he gets close to him there.